The rain fell in steady sheets over Kuala Lumpur, painting the pavements in reflections of golden traffic lights. Ayman stood under the rusted awning of a corner Kedai Runsit in Wongsal Maju, watching the city's heartbeat pulse through the misty dusk. His phone buzzed again. It was the 5th missed call from his father. He knew what it meant. Every year, without fail, the Rahim family would return to the old Kampung house on the outskirts of Gombak for the Majlis Syukur Wajib Tahunan, the annual Thanksgiving gathering. It was no simple kenduri. It was a lavish, ceremonial affair, complete with rented tents, hired musicians, and a buffet that could rival a hotel wedding. Every family member was expected to contribute financially. Refusal was not an option. Ayman sighed as he unlocked the screen. A new message awaited him. Don't embarrass us. Your siblings are already transferring their share. Aya. The guilt tugged at him like an anchor. But guilt was nothing new. For years, he had watched his sister Zahara work overtime just to keep up with the financial burden. He had seen the silent arguments, the sleepless nights. Yet still, the tradition went on. He tucked the phone into his pocket and stepped into the rain, letting it soak through his shirt. The city's chaos muffled the noise in his mind. He hadn't replied. Not yet. But this year, he wasn't sure he would. The Rahim ancestral home sat on a small hill, framed by overgrown bushes and a sagging mango tree. Ayman arrived at dusk, his jeans damp from the train ride and long walk through muddy paths. The scent of pandan and charcoal smoke clung to the air as he stepped through the wooden gates. Inside, the house buzzed with preparation. Aunties wrapped pullet in banana leaves. Children darted between chairs with sticky fingers. At the far end of the living room, Zahara sat with her hijab loose around her neck, tallying receipts with weary eyes. She looked up and gave him a faint smile. You came, she said. For now, Ayman replied. Zahara gestured to a stack of envelopes on the table. They're collecting early this year. Aya wants everything settled before the imam arrives. Ayman sat down beside her. How much did you give? She hesitated, then whispered, 3,000. His jaw tightened. That's half your salary. Zahara looked away. He said it's our duty, that it keeps the family blessed. Before Ayman could respond, a voice boomed from the hallway. Ayman, their father, Tuan Rahim, entered in a crisp Baju Malayu. His posture was proud, his gaze unflinching. You're late, he said. The imam is expecting our commitment. I hope you're not here empty-handed. Ayman stood slowly. I'm not sure I'll be giving anything this year. The room fell silent. Tuan Rahim's jaw clenched. You dare speak like that under this roof? I'm just asking why. Why must we do this every year? Even when we can't afford it. The silence thickened. Zahara closed her ledger. Tuan Rahim stepped closer, voice like thunder. Because this is what makes us who we are. Without it, we are nothing. Ayman didn't flinch. Maybe being nothing is better than pretending to be something we're not. Outside, the call to Maghrib echoed over the hills. Inside, something far older had been stirred. Later that night, the house settled into a tense quiet. The children had been sent to bed. The dishes washed. The laughter that once echoed from the kitchen had faded into stiff conversation and nervous glances. Ayman sat alone on the veranda, the scent of jasmine drifting from the garden below. The rain had stopped. Crickets now filled the silence his father had left behind. Zahara appeared beside him, her steps light. Here, she said, handing him a worn leather book. You should read this. He looked at the cover. The corners were frayed, the pages brittle. Inside were detailed records, years of Majlis Syukur contributions. Amounts, dates, names. It went back decades. It's Aya's ledger, she said. I used to help him write in it when I was in school. Ayman flipped through the pages. Year after year, the same pattern. Every adult child contributing more than the last. Some entries were scribbled out, replaced with higher figures. What's this? He asked, pointing to a name, Sidi Amina, crossed out in red. Zahara hesitated. That was Aya's sister. She was the first to refuse. What happened to her? She stopped coming. The family stopped speaking her name. It was like She'd never existed. Ayman ran his fingers across the name. The ink had bled slightly into the paper, as if time itself had tried to erase her. Zahara sat down beside him. I used to think this was all sacred, she whispered. A tradition that brought us closer. But now, it just feels like a debt we can never repay. Ayman closed the ledger. Maybe it's time someone stopped pretending. Before Zahara could reply, the old floorboards creaked behind them. A tall, thin figure stepped into the moonlight. It was Malay Mariam, their father's older sister. I heard everything, she said, her voice raspy yet clear. You're not the first to question it, Ayman. He turned to her. Then why does no one speak out? She gave a sad smile. Because silence keeps the peace. And peace, in this family, is more important than truth. She reached into her blouse and pulled out a faded photo. 4 young siblings, standing together in the yard. One of them, unmistakably, was Sidi Amina. She was the bravest of us all, Malay said. But bravery comes with a price. She handed the photo to Ayman and walked away, her silhouette fading into the shadows of the hallway. Ayman stared at the picture, the past now alive in his hands. He knew what he had to do, but the cost was still unknown. Morning light spilled through the wooden shutters of the Rahim family house. It was the day of the Majlis Sukkar. Outside, the hired workers were already setting up the tents, stringing up fairy lights, and unpacking trays of catered food. Inside, the air was thick with incense and expectation. Ayman stood in front of the full-length mirror in the spare room, buttoning up his pale blue baju Malayu. His reflection stared back, composed but uncertain. The photograph of Sidi Amina was tucked safely into the inside pocket of his sampan. A sharp knock came at the door. It was Zahara. Are you ready? She asked, though her tone suggested she hoped he wasn't. Ayman nodded. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Zahara looked at him, eyes tired but warm. I think it's time someone was honest. Just be careful. He followed her down the stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The main hall was already crowded with family members. Cousins he hadn't seen in years. Uncles with folded arms and watchful eyes. Aunties murmuring greetings beneath their breath. In the center, a long table lined with white envelopes, each marked with a name and amount. Tuan Rahim stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 elders from the mosque. He smiled, but there was steel in his gaze. Welcome, he began. Today we honor not just our family, but the blessings we've received through sacrifice and tradition. Every name here has carried this burden proudly. We are not like other families. We give. We serve. We preserve what others have lost. The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded solemnly. Ayman glanced at Zahara. She looked down. Tuan Rahim raised his hand. And so now we begin. The envelopes will be presented in order. One by one, relatives stepped forward, placing their contributions on the table with polite bows. Smiles masked quiet reluctance. Then it was Ayman's turn. He stepped forward slowly, every eye in the room on him. He didn't carry an envelope. Tuan Rahim's smile faded. Ayman, he said. Where is your offering? Ayman reached into his pocket, not for money, but for the photograph. He held it up. This is your sister, Sidi Amina, the one you erased from this family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tuan Rahim stiffened. Ayman's voice was steady. She refused to give. Just like I am refusing today. Not out of spite, but out of love. Because this tradition is no longer about gratitude. It's about pride and fear. The room fell silent. He turned to the crowd. How many of you are struggling? How many borrowed money just to be here today? Why are we still pretending this makes us strong? Someone at the back lowered their head. An auntie gripped her handbag tighter. A cousin looked at his feet. Tuan Rahim stepped forward, face flushed. You are shaming this family. No, Ayman replied. I'm trying to save it. The 2 locked eyes. Generations of silence pressed between them. Then, unexpectedly, a voice spoke up. It was Malay Mariam. She's right here, she said, pointing to the photo. The sister you never mention. She was not a disgrace. She was a warning. Tuan Rahim's lips trembled, but he said nothing. Ayman placed the photo gently on the table. For the first time, the ledger remained closed. And in that silence, something cracked. Not broken, but open. Morning light spilled through the wooden shutters of the Rahim family house. It was the day of the Majlis Sukkur. Outside, the hired workers were already setting up the tents, stringing up fairy lights, and unpacking trays of catered food. Inside, the air was thick with incense and expectation. Ayman stood in front of the full-length mirror in the spare room, buttoning up his pale blue baju Malayu. His reflection stared back, composed but uncertain. The photograph of Siti Amina was tucked safely into the inside pocket of his sampan. A sharp knock came at the door. It was Zahara. "Are you ready?" she asked, though her tone suggested she hoped he wasn't. Ayman nodded. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" Zahara looked at him, eyes tired but warm. "I think it's time someone was honest. Just be careful." He followed her down the stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The main hall was already crowded with family members. Cousins he hadn't seen in years. Uncles with folded arms and watchful eyes. Aunties murmuring greetings beneath their breath. In the center, a long table lined with white envelopes, each marked with a name and amount. Tuan Rahim stood at the head of the table, flanked by two elders from the mosque. He smiled, but there was steel in his gaze. "Welcome," he began. "Today we honor not just our family, but the blessings we've received through sacrifice and tradition. Every name here has carried this burden proudly. We are not like other families. We give. We serve. We preserve what others have lost." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded solemnly. Ayman glanced at Zahara. She looked down. Tuan Rahim raised his hand. "And so now we begin. The envelopes will be presented in order." One by one, relatives stepped forward, placing their contributions on the table with polite bows. Smiles masked quiet reluctance. Then it was Ayman's turn. He stepped forward slowly, every eye in the room on him. He didn't carry an envelope. Tuan Rahim's smile faded. "Ayman," he said, "where is your offering?" Ayman reached into his pocket, not for money, but for the photograph. He held it up. "This is your sister, Siti Amina, the one you erased from this family." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tuan Rahim stiffened. Ayman's voice was steady. "She refused to give. Just like I am refusing today. Not out of spite, but out of love. Because this tradition is no longer about gratitude. It's about pride and fear." The room fell silent. He turned to the crowd. "How many of you are struggling? How many borrowed money just to be here today? Why are we still pretending this makes us strong?" Someone at the back lowered their head. An auntie gripped her handbag tighter. A cousin looked at his feet. Tuan Rahim stepped forward, face flushed. "You are shaming this family." "No," Ayman replied. "I'm trying to save it." The two locked eyes. Generations of silence pressed between them. Then, unexpectedly, a voice spoke up. It was Lang Mariam. "She's right here," she said, pointing to the photo. "The sister you never mention. She was not a disgrace. She was a warning." Tuan Rahim's lips trembled, but he said nothing. Ayman placed the photo gently on the table. For the first time, the ledger remained closed. And in that silence, something cracked. Not broken, but open. The ceremony continued, but its spirit had changed. Though the tents outside were lit and the buffet laid out with silver trays, a strange hush lingered over the gathering. The usual laughter was replaced by careful glances and conversations carried in whispers. The presence of the photograph on the donation table sat like a silent witness, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. Ayman stood by the edge of the courtyard, away from the main crowd. The soft call of a burung merba echoed from a nearby tree. Zahara joined him, with 2 cups of syrup banding in her hands. She handed one over. "They're still talking," she said. Long Zubaydah was in tears. Ayman took a sip. "Because of what I said?" "No," Zahara replied. "Because she said it was the first time someone told the truth out loud." He looked toward the crowd. Uncles and aunties were grouped in corners, not in the usual festive circles, but in quiet little clusters, whispering among themselves. Some eyes met his with uncertainty. Others nodded, briefly, but unmistakably. Mackling Miriam emerged from the hallway and approached them. Her steps were slow, but she stood tall. "I've never seen your father's silence like that," she said. "I wasn't trying to shame him," Ayman said. "I just wanted them to understand." Mackling chuckled softly. Truth rarely comes without discomfort. She turned her eyes toward the sky, where the clouds had begun to shift, revealing patches of blue. "You know, after Amina left, I wrote to her for years," she said. "Aya found the letters once. Burnt them in front of me. Said if I ever contacted her again, I'd be out too." Zahara's eyes widened. "Did she ever write back?" she asked. Mackling nodded. She said she was happy. Poor, but peaceful. She'd opened a food stall in Johor. Had 2 daughters. Ayman felt a swell in his chest, some mix of sorrow and relief. For all these years, her memory had been painted as shame. But she had lived. "I wish I'd met her," he said. "She died 2 years ago," Mackling said gently. "But she would have liked you." Suddenly, from across the courtyard, a voice called out. It was Pak Su Hafiz, one of the quieter uncles. "I'm not paying this year," he announced, a little shaky, but loud enough to be heard. "I've got bills to pay. The majlis will go on without my money." Silence again. Then someone clapped, tentatively at first, then joined by another. Then more. Within moments, the air shifted. One by one, cousins, aunties, even in-laws began speaking up. Some politely, some nervously, some with relief. "I'm cutting mine in half. I've been borrowing from my wife's family every year. I thought I was the only one." And still, at the center, Tuan Rahim stood like stone. His hands clasped tightly behind his back, eyes staring ahead. Mackling looked toward him. "He's hearing it," she said. "But whether he listens, that's his choice." Ayman knew this was not a victory. Not yet. The walls of tradition did not fall in a day. But they had cracked. And something was coming through. Something real. The next morning came quietly. The scent of last night's feast still lingered faintly in the air, lemongrass, smoke, sweet glutinous rice. Birds called from the trees beyond the kampung house, their cries sharper in the early light. Ayman sat alone on the back steps of the house, nursing a mug of kopi o. The wood beneath him was damp with dew, and the garden lay still, untouched. His thoughts were heavy, not with regret, but with uncertainty. The silence of the night before still echoed within him. It hadn't been a confrontation. It had been surrender, quiet, unresolved. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Zahara, a soft towel over her shoulder, her hair still damp from her shower. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. Ayman shook his head. "I thought there'd be a fight. A speech. Something." But he just walked away. Zahara looked out at the garden, her expression unreadable. Maybe that was the speech. They sat there in silence for a while, the weight of what had passed settling between them. Then came another presence. Tuan Rahim. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, a folded newspaper in hand, though it remained unopened. He didn't say a word. He sat down beside his children, one knee cracking slightly as he bent. It was the first time in years the 3 of them had sat like this, no obligations, no expectations, no ceremony. He sipped his own coffee, dark and unsweetened. Then, without looking at either of them, he spoke. "When I was a boy," he said, "we didn't have this gathering. The Majlis Sukar didn't exist." Ayman and Zahara glanced at each other. "It began after your grandfather passed away," their father continued. "There was no will, no land, only debts. People talked, said we'd lost honor, that our name meant nothing. I created the tradition to fix that." He paused. "Every year, I made it bigger, louder, so people wouldn't ask questions, so they wouldn't see what was missing." Ayman spoke quietly. "What was missing?" Tuan Rahim stared at the horizon. "Peace." The word landed like a stone in the stillness of morning. I thought if I kept everyone together, forced it, even, it would protect us. I didn't see what it cost. Ayman said nothing. Neither did Zahara. There was nothing to say. Only to listen. I don't know how to undo it, he admitted, voice rough. But I won't force it again. He stood slowly, folding his newspaper under one arm. As he turned to leave, he looked at Ayman, not with the weight of authority, but with the weariness of a man who had carried something too long. You were right, he said. Then he walked back into the house, the screen door creaking shut behind him. Zahara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Ayman blinked, staring at the spot where his father had stood. It hadn't been an apology, but it had been enough. The day after the gathering felt lighter, as though the walls of the old Kampung house had released a breath they'd been holding for years. The final trays of uneaten food were packed away. Decorations were removed, folded neatly into boxes, uncertain if they would ever be used again. Ayman remained behind as the others left for the city. Zahara returned to Ampang to prepare for work. The cousins, uncles, and aunties filtered away with polite goodbyes and long looks. Only Ayman stayed, helping Malay Mariam organize the storage room beneath the stairs, a forgotten place full of dust, rusted tins, and yellowing memories. They worked in silence until Malay pulled out a tin box, the edges warped, a padlock rusted shut. She tapped it with her knuckles. This was Amina's, she said. Ayman knelt beside her as she pried it open with an old screwdriver. Inside were dozens of folded papers, tied with faded blue string. Letters. Some stamped, some not. Some addressed. Some scribbled in haste. Malay handed him the top one. Dear Mariam, today I sold 20 packets of nasi lemak. It's enough for rice and eggs tomorrow. The handwriting was careful, neat despite its age. Ayman unfolded more letters. Stories of small joys, of hardship, of resilience, of freedom. Letters that had never been sent. He looked at Malay. You kept these? I found them in the storeroom after she left. Aya never knew. I hid them. Ayman picked up another envelope. The ink had bled through. The return address was real, written in careful block letters. She lived her life, Malay said, wiping dust from her hands. She missed us. But she never came back. Ayman folded the letter again, placing it back into the box with gentle hands. I wish I could have met her, he said. Malay nodded. You did in a way. Through all of this. Through the questions you asked. They sat together, the silence between them no longer heavy. Instead, it felt like space, wide, open, waiting. Ayman stood and carried the box to the living room. There, on the table where the donation envelopes had once sat, he placed it beside the closed ledger. Side by side. Unspoken history beside unchallenged tradition. He took out his phone and snapped a photo. Not for social media. Not for drama. Just for remembrance. That night, before he left for Kuala Lumpur, he stood once more on the veranda, looking out into the darkened garden. He heard his father's footsteps behind him. I found the letters, Ayman said quietly. I know, came the reply. Mariam told me. There was a pause. She wrote more than I ever said, Tuan Rahim admitted. She lived more freely than you ever allowed, Ayman replied. Another pause. She deserved better, his father whispered. The words lingered in the air like mist. I think, Ayman said, you both did. He turned, picked up his bag, and walked down the steps toward the path that led back to the city. The house behind him remained still. But inside, something had begun to move. 2 weeks later, Kuala Lumpur buzzed as always, metallic with traffic, the air warm and thick, the skyline cluttered with ambition. Yet for Ayman something had shifted. The city no longer felt like escape. It felt like contrast. A place of movement, where silence couldn't grow too deep, and no tradition stretched far enough to keep him bound. He sat in his small apartment in Bangsar, the photo of Siti Amina now framed and resting beside the window. Behind it, the faded letters were tucked safely in an envelope marked with her name. They had become more than family artifacts. They were a map, proof that people could leave and still remain whole. Across the room, Zahara scrolled through her phone. "Did you see this?" she asked. Ayman looked up. She turned her screen to him. A family WhatsApp group. Someone had posted a message. "Next year's Majlis Sukkur will be optional. No mandatory contributions. Come if you wish, give if you can." Ayman blinked. There were replies. Some cheerful, some confused. One of the uncles replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Another said, "Finally." He let out a slow breath. He actually did it. Zahara gave a small smile. Bit of a quiet revolution, don't you think? Ayman looked out the window, to the honking taxis below, the rows of fruit sellers along the street, the children in school uniforms darting between cars. "It's always the quiet ones that last," he said. His phone buzzed again. This time, a message from his father. "I found a photo of Amina, holding you when you were a baby. I'll send it to you." No apology. No long explanation. Just a thread, fragile but real. He typed back, "Thank you. I'd like that." He didn't press send immediately. He thought of his father at the Kampung house, drinking black coffee in silence. He thought of Amina, wiping sweat from her forehead at a roadside stall in Johor. He thought of his own voice cracking the air, splitting through decades of expectation like a blade. He hit send, and for the first time in a long while he felt still. Zahara stood and reached for her bag. "We should get going. The stall in Jalan Tar's about to close." "Let's walk," Ayman said. "No rush." As they stepped out into the street, the city wrapped around them, not like a net, but like a tide. Moving forward, relentless, alive. A year passed. The next Majlis Sukkur arrived with far less fanfare. No printed invitations. No enforced attendance. A quiet notice was shared via WhatsApp. "Those who wish to come are welcome. We gather in gratitude, not in guilt." The house in Kuala Lumpur's old village quarter had changed subtly. The garden was trimmed, the chairs fewer, the donation table gone. In its place stood a long, low dining table filled with home-cooked dishes, some brought by guests, some prepared by Malay and Zahara. It was not a performance anymore. It was a meal. Ayman arrived late, intentionally. He carried no envelope, only a covered tiffin of chicken rendang and a cloth-bound book under his arm. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Children ran barefoot. Music played softly from an old speaker in the corner, Malay classics, not ceremonial nasiad. Elders sat on cushions, talking like neighbors, not royalty. Tuan Rahim sat beneath the window, dressed in a simple batik shirt. Age had crept further into his shoulders. But so had softness. When he saw Ayman, he gave a small nod. Not dominance. Not command. Recognition. Ayman returned the nod, then placed the cloth-bound book on the edge of the food table. Its cover read only, "Amina binti Rahim, Letters and Memory." Malay had helped compile it. Zahara had typed every line. They'd added photos. Scanned every page. It was never meant for sale, just for the family. Just to prove she had existed beyond whispers. As people ate, they noticed the book. Some picked it up. Some cried. Others simply sat longer than usual, their hands resting on its cover. Late into the afternoon, Ayman walked out into the back garden, where the rambutan tree still stood, its branches low and red with fruit. A few children were trying to reach them, stacking plastic stools dangerously. He helped them, lifting one boy by the waist until the boy squealed with laughter and dropped 3 rambutans into Zahara's scarf. As they played, a familiar presence stepped into the sunlight. Tuan Rahim. He stood by the edge of the garden, watching them. After a while, he spoke. "I remembered her birthday this year." Ayman looked over. "Did you say a prayer?" "I cooked her favorite dish. Kari ikan tenggiri," his father replied. "Then I ate it alone." Ayman smiled faintly. She would have liked that. They stood in silence as the breeze moved gently through the trees. "Thank you," Tuan Rahim said quietly. "For what?" "For speaking when I wouldn't." Ayman didn't answer. He didn't need to. The children laughed. The tree rustled. The scent of lemongrass floated from the kitchen. And inside the house, on the main table where the names had once been tallied and judged, her name now rested, untouched, unburdened, remembered,